We look forward to the time when there is no more night, when your people can come out of hiding, when your people can't stop all the fighting, when peace is established across the nation, and we bow before you in adoration at the New Jerusalem, when the war is done, when the world is new, the tribes are one, the New Jerusalem, that's where we'll be, just worshiping the King of Kings, the God of all.
Shalom to all of you, and I want to thank you for joining us today for this week's Bible study. We're actually going to have an interesting kind of Bible study. This week will be a kind of a two parts put into kind of one following the other, and then next week we are going to have the other two parts of the continuation of this Bible study. So what is this Bible study about that we're going to do this week? Well, part one is called Some Questions About Prayer, Making Sense of Morning Prayers. Just to give you a little background, in the Jewish world, we do morning prayers that are fixed morning prayers in the morning, generally coming also, most of them coming from the Bible themselves, from the Torah. And so it's not like your typical prayer where people wake up and say, thank you, God, for this new day or whatever. There are specific prayers that are said in the morning. So the question is, can morning prayers be meaningful and routine at the same time? Repeating the same ancient words every morning with genuine feeling can definitely be challenging. And yet the seemingly impossible task is exactly what Judaism asks of us. Okay, so tell us to pray whenever we feel truly moved, or demand that we daven shecharit on the clock, that is to say our morning prayers on the clock at a certain time, regardless of how we feel. Even in the Bible, in the Brit Hadashah, in the New Testament, it says we should even praise God in and for all situations. That doesn't mean, hey, if you feel like it, praise me. If you don't. No, even when you don't feel like it, praise the Lord. So even here, whether we feel like it or not, it's good to start the day with the morning prayers. But how are we possibly supposed to meet both of these demands at once, making it meaningful and also doing it on a daily basis at the same time? Okay. So solving this problem may lie in understanding the inspiring effect that morning specifically can have on our prayers. So we will explore the importance of praying in the morning. Now, I will offer a close reading of the Shema and its brachot, which is its blessing, highlighting a deep connection between the Shema, which is where we'd say God is one, okay, and the 6 days of creation. This leads to a discussion on why the different stages of creation are all described as the same formula, which is, it was evening and it was morning. So the surprising conclusion touches on the very meaning of creation, the nature of shacharit and Shema, and how to experience a sincere, heartfelt connection with God each and every day. Okay, so my name is Rabbi Harel Clint Fry, and today I want to talk to you about a really big part of Judaism that seems partially difficult to relate to. So, you know, in terms of our daily and weekly routine, a lot of what I do, at least as an observant Messianic Jew every day, is pretty relatable. the Sabbath, for example, Saturday, the day of rest. Okay, and if you look into the Bible, Shabbat is the Sabbath. And even in the Italian language, Sabato is Saturday, okay? It's not Sunday. So the day of rest is actually Saturday. Obviously, it's important that we take a day of rest because sometimes people might not have a choice. But for me as a Jew, it's important. And once you get past some of the inconvenience, for example, some people don't drive their cars. It depends on which country you're in, how far you need to go to get to your synagogue, such and whatnot. However, generally, things related to work itself are not done, okay? Many people won't even turn on the lights. They'll have a clapper or something to turn on their lights. Now, that's, in my opinion, a bit much. However, not watching TV, for example, not cooking. We generally cook the day before on either Friday morning or Friday afternoon, sometimes even on Thursday to get prepared for the Shabbat. So these are just different ways of entering into that day of rest where we don't have to take care of anything. Just warm it up or keep it on the warmer or throw it in the microwave, for example. And by doing this, we can find ourselves welcoming that little breath of fresh air that is this weekly day of rest. And I don't know about you, but I need it. Okay, so it's a time to kind of center yourself, get back in balance, collect your thoughts, reach out to our friends, really be present with our family, and most of all, connect to God. It's an amazing thing, and it's very spiritual. Most of our friends, me included, we can relate to that very easily. We can say with real sincerity that we would not trade the Sabbath experience for anything. And I don't know how anybody lives without it, to tell you the truth. I don't know how some people can go all 7 days of the week by working, or even if they're not working, they're out doing something, keeping themselves busy instead of just taking a day off and not doing almost anything. All right, so now we're going to talk about Chesed. What is Chesed? Simply the love of God. Okay? How can we show Chesed? Maybe by helping the needy, being there for others in their times of crisis. It makes you feel pretty good, but that's not the important thing. That's not why we do it. It's a pretty relative part of our spiritual growth and our connection with what God even commands us to do. Love one another as you love yourselves. That's where it boils down to. So learning Torah, the Torah is amazing. It really is awesome. There were many Jews growing up. They can have really horrible Hebrew teachers maybe, and I'm sure many have not had some great experiences. But on the whole, the Torah is pretty awesome. And it can be intellectually captivating. It can be spiritually stirring and relative also. Okay, so there's one part of a daily spiritual, or what some people call religious life, speaking personally, at least for me, has always been a little more difficult to relate to at times, okay? Hard to really get into in a genuine way, especially if I'm doing something that is done on a daily basis. And that actually is prayer. Morning prayers in particular. I don't know about you, but I am not a morning person, okay? I need my first cup of coffee before I should even open my mouth and collect or create even a thought. I am not with it until at least I've had my first cup of coffee. So it's not easy. Think of all the things that are barriers here. There's a language barrier for starters. The prayers are said in Hebrew. And it's not just the fact that it's in Hebrew, even if you know basic Hebrew. Reading the Bible is one thing. Reading the prayers, it's a whole different ball. The prayers are poetry. And most of us don't use poetry as a daily way of speaking. Okay, prayer is like the only time when we're routinely saying poetry. If you look in the Bible, the prayers, the Psalms themselves are poems, and they're written to song. Okay, so routine poetry seems like an oxymoron, but in prayer, that is what we do every day. All right, so The real truth is, one of the things that makes morning prayer in particular difficult is just the fact that it's in the morning. That says it all. I mean, like, what if you're really not a morning person like me? I was never a morning person. I'm still not at the age of 51. I have very interesting memories. Even when I was younger, struggling to wake up. Okay. All right. So it's time to wake up. You gotta wake up, Clint. You'll miss the Zaman Kriyas, for example, right now, which is the second blessing before the Shema, found in Isaiah 45:7. Now, Zaman Kriyas Shema, the time to say Shema in the morning, the bane of maybe many childhood existence, and even possibly adult, it turns out, folks, that there's a prescribed time by the Jewish law to say the morning Shema. Okay. Some people choose 5, 5:30, 6. All right, but it is earlier than a sleeping person, teenager, or even adult might like. Okay, so maybe I would stumble out of bed, a little groggy, definitely got some sleep in my eyes, and sometimes you find yourself wondering to yourself, does God really want this? Does he even care? Is he into this? It just sounds so rigid that I have to wake up in the morning every morning really early by this prescribed time to say these words, the Shema. Okay. Shema is, "Hear, O Israel, I, the Lord, am one." Okay. This great declaration of faith is part of our morning prayers. Why does it have to be locked into this specific time? Well, while we're at it, and it might seem strange, but why this Shema, this declaration of faith, was actually part of our morning prayers at all? Why? What about it makes it a prayer? It isn't, obviously, if you think about it. It's really a prayer, is it? Prayer is a very subjective yearning. We're talking, we're relating to our Creator. Okay, we're relating to God the Father. We're relating to our Savior, Yeshua. Okay, and we want to talk. That's prayer. Prayer is talking to God and receiving from Him that which He has to tell us. However, prayer can also be the Shema. All right, so prayer is a very emotional, one-on-one kind of intimate dialogue, like I said, with our Creator. And the declaration that God is one sounds like something you might say on the witness stand at a trial. Yes, Your Honor, God is one. Well, it's important, though. It's a statement of faith. What better way to start a day of prayer? All right. Prayer without faith is nothing anyway. So maybe it's a good idea to just start off by saying the Shema. Now, what is it that requires prayer to include statements of faith? So before we even get to the Kriyat Shema, we'll take a look at the blessings that were designed by the rabbis to introduce the Shema. Yes, there are blessings of the Shema. Blessings known as Birchot Kriyat Shema, the blessings of the Shema. Why are the Birchot Kriyat Shema part of this picture? Because if I were to come up with a language for a bracha, which is a blessing of Kriyat Shema on my own, I might say something like, "Blessed are you, O God, who is one, who loves oneness, who hates two-ness, who wants everyone to know how one he is. Blessed are you, one who is, or who is one." Then I would say Shema, the text from the Torah that says so. However, it's a little nice to have something to follow, I have to say, at the hour of 5 or 5:30 in the morning. I don't want to have to formulate a thought or a prayer at that time of the day. So if you actually look at the blessing, what we start Birchat Kriyas Shema with instead, the problem is that it doesn't seem to have much to do with Shema. And here is a blessing I'm going to say. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. That's your basic beginning for any prayer in Judaism. Blessed are you, O God. That's it. So now we have Yotzer or Uvore Choshech. Ose Shalom Uvore et hakol. This is found in Isaiah 45:7. So it goes on to say, the creator of light and the creator of darkness. Wow. Why are we starting off with that? It's a blessing to the Shema. This is the main idea of the first blessing of Shema. And the problem is, I have no problem with blessing God for light and darkness every day. Light is a really good thing. I personally love the light, especially when it's sunny outside. I am happy. Okay, I do not like the dark. And I'm really happy that we have it. It's the basis for all photosynthesis in the world. Okay, without it, we couldn't have plants. The plants couldn't breathe. They couldn't create oxygen. All right. It creates warmth and all types of great things. Okay, what does it have to do with the Shema? So don't call this blessing a blessing of the Shema. Make it just one of the blessings that we bless God for in the morning. When we talk about how great it is that we can walk, how great it is we can talk, let's talk about how great it is that you created light. All right, so why is it that we have this whole other category of blessings of Shema, and this introduces it? This is one of the two great blessings of Shema. Now, here's the interesting part. Let's say there's some sort of answer to this problem. I'm still not satisfied because look how this blessing progresses. It kind of seems to go off the rails here. The easiest way to see this is if you imagine that this isn't some sort of sacred text. Let's say your daughter or your son may come up with this for his or her 7th grade essay. A teacher says, write a proposed blessing of Shema. And here's our son or daughter's blessing, Mary or Mario. And immediately after he or she blesses God for being the creator of light, they then go on to say the following words. And these are from the actual blessings of Shema. Hamayir la'aretz ve'ladarim alea berachamim. The God who causes light to shine upon the earth, upon all the inhabitants of the earth. So I'd say, so far so good. Mary or Mario, that's a very nice blessing. Light is very great for the earth, and it's really great for the inhabitants of the earth. So far so good, but keep on reading in the blessing. So we go on to say, Uvtuvo mechadesh bechol yom tamid maaseh bereshit. And in his goodness, the Lord renews every day, constantly the work of creation. This is straight from the Bible. Okay, this is not anything else but the Bible. So, Ma Rabu Ma'esecha Adonai. Look at all the things you made, God. That's the second part. Kulam Bechochema Asita. All of them have been done with such wisdom. Yeah, because without wisdom, the world could not have been created. Ma'ala haaretz kinyanecha. Now the world is full with all the things that you own. Hamalech hamaroivim levudomeds. You, the king, who is above all, who is above it all from before. Okay, so at this point I'm thinking, wow, Mary, Mario, that's very beautiful poetry. You're sweeping me away with your words. But when I actually stopped to ask myself, but you've kind of gotten swept away with these ideas, and we've just kind of lost the whole train. So because this is a blessing of Shema, fine, but for some reason the blessing of Shema is talking about how great it is that God created light. Now, if I wanted to finish off that blessing, get into the body text, right? In other words, if the topic sentence is, God, it's amazing that you made light. So you would expect the body text to relate directly to the topic sentence. So, Mary or Mario, if I was writing the body text, I would say, light is an amazing thing. Think how bad it would be not to have it. It would be like 321 degrees minus 0 Kelvin. We'd all be frozen. Oh, yeah. That would be really, really bad. And if we had no light, there would be no life. I wouldn't be able to see. Even if I were alive, I'd be bumping into things. Man, God, I really hate bumping into things. That hurts. Thank you for making light. Okay? So that would be a really great blessing. But that is not Mary's or Mario's blessing. Instead, he or she may start talking about God renewing and recreating creation every day. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? What do you even mean God made creation once? He didn't make creation a billion times every single day. However, Mary or Mario explains, and by the way, this is the explanation that many Jewish children are given in school. And so the explanation could be very abstract and philosophical. Imagine Mary sat her mom down or her dad and said, Mom, here's what I mean. You see, it wasn't that God just created the world once, because the truth is that God is like the energy behind the world. So if God would withdraw his energy from the world, it would all evaporate like nothing. And as we know, the Bible even says God has the whole world in his hands, not just the whole world, the whole of his creation, the universe. Everything is in his hand. That's simple. So there's a paragraph in the Maimonides to this effect. And she may show me that paragraph. And I start nodding my head and I say, okay, let's see what you're talking about. And Mary or Mario says, you see, if God would withdraw his power from creation, that tree over there would evaporate. So the only reason that the tree is there is basically because really God didn't just create things once in the 6 days of creation. He's recreating the tree every day. Not just every day, but every second. The tree is being created. That rock over there, he's creating it. He's creating every last little thing all the time. And that's what we're talking about in this prayer. Okay. Now I'm looking at little Mary or Mario and I say, that's a very fascinating abstract concept. But I do not see that it has anything to do with this blessing of Shema that you are making about light. What are you even talking about? All right. So I have 3 basic questions about prayer. Number 1, why is Shema part of prayer? It's just a declaration of faith. That's it. Where is the prayerful part of Shema, so to speak? Number 2, why does the blessing of Shema start off with a blessing about light? And 3, why does the blessing about light go off the rails to talk about creation and how great that God has done all these things? What does that have to do with light? Join me in the second part of today's Bible study as we continue with our talk. Thank you, and I wish you shalom. Shalom again to all of you, and thank you for joining us today on the second part of our Bible study series for this week of a 4-part series. The other 2 parts we'll be doing next week. And we are talking about making sense of morning prayers. And this part is called the road to a resolution. Okay, so interestingly and surprisingly, the blessings of Shema hint to a deep connection, as I said in the last video, between the Shema and the 6 days of creation. When we look at the 6 days inside, we realize that the different stages of creation are all described with the same formula. As I said, it was evening and it was morning. And why is that? And does that help us understand the questions about the very nature of prayer? So now how are we going to deal with this? Okay. So one of the things that perplexed us was the Shema and the first blessing leading into it. And it seems to me that a logical place to begin might actually be to investigate the event that the very first blessing of Shema describes. That is, God's creation of light on the first day of creation. So, I want to take some time with you now to study the text of the Torah that describes that first day and the creation of light. And I think if we can understand that great original event even better, everything else is actually going to come into focus, and all the things that seem so strange and maybe uninspiring, including why little me as a groggy teenager or a groggy adult ought to be stumbling out of my bed to say Shema at the right time. All of those things might actually start to make some sense, might actually start to be a little more meaningful. Okay, so let's try it. Here we are. We're back in the Bible, chapter 1, in the beginning. Okay, in Hebrew, in the beginning, the book of Genesis is called Bereshit. And that simply means in the beginning. Okay, Of course, the word Genesis means beginning. We're at day one of creation, the day on which light gets created. And we're actually going to study this section of text together. Okay, so first question to ask is, I think anyway, is a very broad one and a very difficult one. Why does the Torah go out of its way to describe this as a day of creation? What about these events of the first day actually make it a day? It happened over the, did it happen over the space of 24 hours? Is that what the Torah is trying to force me to believe? And for that matter, why does the Torah insist on there being 6 of these days? 6 days of creation at all? Okay, so you know, me speaking personally, it's one of the hardest questions to deal with. Maybe as a Jew living in the modern world, okay? Many people are going off the beaten path. Somebody might pull you over on the street or on the sidewalk and wants to get into an argument with you about why religion is infantile, irrational, you name it. And the first thing they're going to throw at you, of course, probably, so you really believe that the whole universe was created in what, 6 days? Sounds kind of childless. I live in an era where there's unanimous consent among the scientists and everybody that the world is really, really old, like billions of years old, 13.4 billion years old to be exact. And here you are clinging to this whole 6 days of creation. It just sounds a little bit juvenile. So it's like you think, why did the Torah put me in this little box? It's not even a box. You were put into because you just happen to live in the year 2020. So no matter when you lived, if you lived 300 years ago, you are still kind of in a box. You're still struggling with trying to understand these 6 days of creation. Personally, I've come to the conclusion it was literally 6 days. Okay. So imagine living in 1692. Everyone's walking around in tights in Italy, or something like that. And I'm leaning on I'm kind of leaning on the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Maybe that's why it's leaning. And anyway, wondering about creation. It still seems kind of strange to me that this big old world God just kind of threw together in 6 days. Not just this world, the whole universe, if you think about it. So imagine you just had God creating all these things and there was no mention of how long it took, no mention of the days. You wouldn't come running to me and say, Rabbi Harold, where are all the days? I don't see where all the days are. You wouldn't have said that, right? You wouldn't have thought that you needed these 6 days. So why does the Bible or the Torah bother throwing this in? Okay. But it's worse than just the time frame that God takes to create the world. It's not just that 6 days is too short. It's that the days don't even seem like days. Okay, I mean, according to the Torah itself, when did the sun get created? That's on day 4. So could you please explain to me then how I got 3 days before that? And where did the light come from? How is there even supposed to be 3 days when there's no sun in the universe? At any point in history, you have a problem with that. I could be living in 300 BC and I might struggle with that. So by way of dealing with this big problem, I'm going to actually make life worse for you just for a moment by introducing 2 more problems. So here we go. What would you say God was doing for the 6 days of creation? I mean, if you could just give it to me in a headline, literally one word, what would you say? What was God doing during the 6 days of creation? You might say he's creating, right? I mean, that's what God's doing. And of course, he is creating, right? He is making something from nothing. He's putting stuff over here. He's moving it over there. He's dividing things, forming stuff. He's building on stuff. All these are creative activities, and that's what God is doing at this time. But there's one thing that God is doing during the 6 days of creation that has nothing to do with creation. Can you find what it is? Can we see it? I'm going to actually read this verse for you, okay? In Hebrew, it says, Vayomer Elohim, and the Lord declared. That's all you had to do. He spoke it. Vehi or Yehi or let there be light. Vayihi or, and there in fact was light. So far so good. All right, this is very inspiring. Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov, and God looked at the light and saw that it was good. All right. Vayavdel Elohim ben haor uven hachoshech. He divided the light and the darkness. Again, whatever this means in the cosmic sense of these words, we can't understand that all of this has to do with creation, right? God looked at the light, decided it was good. It means that God evaluated what he created and decided to keep it. Okay, that's part of the creative process. Whenever we might make something, you go to sort of stand back and evaluate it. Decide if it's good or not. All right, decide whether you're going to keep it or get rid of it. That's part of the creative process. All right, just like maybe, even though we don't create, but say I draw up a plan for a building and I build that building according to the plans. It might look good on paper, but once that building's done, I might take a look back and say, is that good or not? Wow, that's not so great. Or, hey, wow, that's fantastic. Let's keep it. So here we have the same type of thing. Okay. We want to make sure the light is good. You kind of put the darkness over here, light over there. All of this is creative activity. But now let's keep on reading. Okay. Vayikra Elohim laor yom v'lachoshech kara layla, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called light. Or night, I'm sorry. That's the verse that you take your little red marker and you might want to cross out some of that stuff. You'd say, I don't understand. Why did you have to say that God named the light day and the darkness night? Does it really matter? Why is God getting into the naming business anyway? Indeed, if anyone names things later on in Genesis and Bereshit, it's Adam. Adam ends up naming all the animals, and indeed, in our life as human beings, that's one thing we're really good at. We come up with names for everything. Okay, naming things, coming up with words for stuff. Hey, we even created the Merriam-Webster dictionary with 30,000 words in it, all by our lonesome selves. All right, so we're very good at coming up with names for things. We don't need God to come up with a name. So here comes God, and very helpfully says, oh, by the way, that, or in Hebrew, that's light. That's called day. And what if he hadn't said that? We wouldn't have figured it out. Maybe we would have come up with another name. I mean, there are other things. We'd mentioned water here, right? God didn't have to name and say, oh, that's water. It's water. Human beings have that name. Okay, so then it says God separated. Right. We don't have to define separation. God's not dictionary making here. He's creating a universe. So why bother naming these things? Especially since the naming doesn't even make any sense. What are we saying? God called light day, and that darkness, he called it night? Well, here's the problem. That light, most certainly, whatever it was, it's not actually day. How do you know it's not actually day? Because what is day? Day is when the sun comes up, goes through the sky, and it sets. But the sun wasn't created yet. So how could you call that light day? The one thing that God decides to name, maybe he's wrong about it. I don't know. It sounds so basic and juvenile, but maybe he's wrong. So why include this whole statement of fact as if it's a fact when it's not really fact, and it has nothing to do with creation anyway? Well, why is it even here? Why do we hear about the stuff that God names? That is the next question that I want to kind of throw at you. There's only one thing I might think of that maybe the light might have come from, by the way. It's Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world. Since there's no sun at this point, that's the only thing I could think of. Where's this light coming from? Maybe it's coming from Yeshua. However, now we're going to look at the next part of this verse. Vayihi erev vayihi boker yom echad. And it was evening, and it was morning. Now each day, when the day is over, we hear these words. Vayihi erev, vayihi boker yom. And it was evening, and it was morning, and that's the end of the day. Now, I just want to throw this out to you kind of playfully. Why is it that the Torah settled on that convention? Especially because that isn't either true, right? Because evening, we know what evening is. Evening seems to be when the sun goes down. Morning is when the sun comes up. And again, there's no sun at this point. So why bother talking about evening and the morning in the first place when it's really not evening and morning yet? Why do we even have that phrase at this point? So again, if it wasn't there, you wouldn't be surprised. If it just said, okay, that was one day of creation, that was the second day of creation, and you didn't have that phrase, it was morning and night. Okay, you wouldn't have complained about it. So what exactly is that adding to our understanding of things, and why is it even there? Okay, so I'd actually like to throw one final question into the mix, because after we have this mysterious Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, we've got Yom Echad. Okay, now how do you translate Yom Echad? I'm just looking over into our, maybe one of those translation apps, and it translated as a first day. But that translation is actually manifestly wrong. The Torah doesn't actually call it the first day. That would have been Yom Rishon. But the Torah doesn't say Yom Rishon, it says Yom Echad, which literally, instead of meaning first day, just means one day. Okay, there's a difference right there. So why say Yom Echad, or one day? How do we make sense of this? Okay, so we've got these four basic problems. We've got the big problem. Why are there even 6 days of creation at all? How am I supposed to understand this? And then there's other problems. Why does God get involved in the naming business? Why do we hear about him naming the light day, the darkness night? And why do we hear about this evening and the morning for each day? Why does it say one day instead of the first day? So, okay, there's a crucial clue that I think we just got here in this perplexing phrase, Vayi erev, vayi voker yom echad. And I want to focus on that clue with you. It turns out that that phrase is used to describe the close of every day except for one. What day is that? One day does not have that phrase. Okay, there is no, and it was evening and it was morning on the primal day of creation. And which day do you think that is? It turns out it's the 7th day, the Shabbat, Sabbath. Look at Sabbath as described in Genesis 1. You will not find anywhere it was evening and it was morning on the Sabbath day, on the 7th day, when God rested. So my question for you, why is it not there? Why is it that one day doesn't have this phrase? What does it tell you about the phrase, Vayi erev, vayi boker, that's not included on the Sabbath? How is the Sabbath different from all the other days? Well, the most obvious answer to that is that Sabbath is the one day that nothing was created on. Nothing happened. God rested. So there's something about this notion of evening and morning that's associated with creating things coming, with the created things coming into the world. The clue is, and it was evening and it was morning, has some sort of association with creative activity. So what is the meaning of that? Thank you for joining us today. We will get into that next week as we go into parts 3 and 4 of this Bible study. So shalom to all of you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Goodbye.
Now for the Aaronic blessing. Adesso la benedizione di Aarone. Yevarechecha Adonai veishmerecha. Yair Adonai panavalecha veichunecha. Yisa Adonai panavalecha v'yasim lecha shalom. V'shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Sarha shalom shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, the Prince of Peace. Shalom.
Che il Signore vi benedica e vi protegga. Il Signore faccia risplendere il suo volto su di voi e vi sia propizio. Che il Signore elevi il suo volto su di voi e vi dia la pace. In nome di Yeshua, Gesù, il Messia, il Principe della pace. Shalom.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך יישא אדוני פניו אליך והשם לך Shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.